Welcome to Sabbath Vespers. I'm Nerida Taylor Bates, the president of the Association of Adventist Women. Today we're talking about service, how we are called to be the hands and feet of Jesus. I'm wondering if the people who do this kind of service are recognized in your church as being leaders. As you can see from the film behind me, it was too loud for me to film my introduction at the La Sierra University Church Food Drive. La Sierra University Church has a long history of community service, but when COVID hit, they had a problem. Most of the people who worked there were retired and at high risk for complications from COVID. So they had quite a dilemma. The answer came in an unusual way. The young people behind me are Mormons working on mission service. They volunteered to help at the Community Service Center, and it works well. God is always solving problems for missions. Our speaker today is Joy Marie Butler. She's a well-traveled woman, and she has lots of stories to tell about the abuse and disadvantages of women. At the comments section, you'll be able to find some practical ways in which you can help all of our service providers today. Joy Marie Butler is the president of the Women's Christian Temperance Union in the South Pacific. There she works to help prevent the difficulties caused by alcohol and drug abuse. Our panel today is led by Dr. Sandra Brooks. She's a native of Toronto, and she went to Oakwood University. She has a PhD from Loma University, and she works with adults and children with developmental disabilities at Inland Regional Center. She's also the Community Service Director at Mount Rubidoux Seventh-day Adventist Church in Riverside. Her panel is going to discuss some of the issues facing those who provide service. Let's bow our heads. Dear God, as we think about being your hands and feet, please help us to have your ears and eyes to see where we're needed in this world, to see how we can best spread your love and grace and kindness. Amen.
Hello, friends. Warren Bennis said, leadership is the capacity to translate vision into reality. You see, I was an orphan. My father abandoned me and the family at an early age. As a result, I had first-hand emotions of what it is like to be lonely without a father to love me and guide me. I was unhappy and depressed. Those feelings have stayed with me throughout my life. 20 years ago, while still fighting cancer, I decided to refocus my life. I had no college degree or training, only the verse in James 1:27. Religion that is pure and undefiled before God and the Father is this: to visit orphans and widows in their affliction. Leadership starts with servanthood. I knew I possessed integrity, vision, commitment, hard work, and persistence, never to give up. God provided all the expertise and the resources. For the last 22 years, I have worked alone in a small home office with no salary and the occasional volunteer. It was challenging at times, including a fire that wiped out the charity. However, God's hand always guided me through the tough times, and I always found a good reason to keep going. Serving gave me the satisfaction of having a purpose and meaning to my life. Because of His blessings and a lot of hard work, we now have a group of faithful supporters. Each year we raise money and expose young people to the crisis of poverty with our Do Fast program that is now incorporated in the North American Division Bible curriculum. Today, Restore a Child has 7 homes and 20 schools in Indonesia, South Sudan, Ukraine, Haiti, and more. We are agile enough to be able to provide food relief to the Navajo Nation during the COVID outbreak and for the victims of the Beirut explosion and several countries in Africa. God has blessed us so we can bring hope, healing, and health to the 4,000 children in 10 countries.
Hello, my name is Joy Butler, and my talk today for you is about serving in uncertain times. We do live in uncertain times. This year has been so different for all of us all over the world. Some good things, but many bad things. And I wonder if we are finding purpose in these uncertain times. I come from New Zealand, but I live in Australia now, and I have lived in many countries all over the world. And I'm very grateful for that experience, even though I went to some of them terrified and very uncertain. And for a long time now, I have been concerned about the hurting women of the world in their uncertain situations. I've become aware of the gross negligence and inequality when it comes to the female gender. And this came about from various origins. First of all, my grandmother and my mother and my sisters were all very concerned about the hurting women around them and cared for them and showed them much love. My experience later on in life in the Pacific Islands and in Africa and in the many times I've visited in Asia presented to me a stark statement about the injustice and unfair poverty and extreme awful conditions that many women have to live with. There's generally a low regard for women in most parts of the world. I want to list a few. I experienced the sadness of seeing multiple wives in small houses in Zimbabwe where I lived. I remember giving out clothing and food in the rural areas, and I came across some beautiful young women who all had the same husband. They shared clothes, they shared the hut, they shared the space, they shared food, and that really troubled me. I remember the many people who came past my gate begging for this or that, and I would often ask them how many children they had. It would be 5, 6, sometimes 12 or 15, and I would urge them to visit the contraception clinic just down the road. I remember the many drunken husbands on the streets, especially on Sabbath afternoons. Women were hard at work in their houses, grinding corn, preparing food for the family while the husband was drunk on the streets. So it was so unfair. I visited a village once. The first time I ever encountered FGM, or female genital mutilation, was in Kenya, in the Samburu area, where there was a beautiful young 16-year-old girl sitting in a pool of blood outside her hut, and she'd just been circumcised and would be married in a short time. I think of Papua New Guinea, where I've just lived for the last 7 years. There are thousands of women there who are tortured because they've been accused of being witches or sorcerers. This is very common. It's atrocious treatment. And I've heard at night in Papua New Guinea the screams of women being hurt, being abused, being beaten. I know about women whose noses have been cut off. I met a woman whose fingers were cut off, sometimes for ridiculous reasons. In Africa, I visited a number of prisons, a number of women prisons, and seen thousands of women incarcerated for sometimes very silly reasons. Usually the husband's problem, his fault, he's stolen something or he's done something really bad, and the wives have been there when the police came, and they've gone to prison. Sometimes they stay there for years because they've got no advocates, no lawyers to speak up for them. There's a great sadness. I've seen in Papua New Guinea the disgusting ablution blocks in bathrooms for girls in Adventist schools, appalling. And even small children sometimes drown in those pits. So this brings me to where I am now in this uncertain time, this uncertain world I live in, to three important things or projects that have become very significant for me and for which I try to advocate for. I want to talk about them for a moment. First of all, I've called this talk Sanitation, Sex and Savannah. So the three things are, number one, sanitation. In Papua New Guinea, as I mentioned before, the bathroom and toilet facilities are atrocious. Schools have disgusting bathrooms and toilets. They're dirty and smelly and broken, or not at all, in which case girls have to go to the river to wash and to ablute. They might go through jungle or through stony paths through the bush, or they defecate in broken shelters behind their dormitories. They're all appalling, disgusting and filthy. Now, missionaries came to Papua New Guinea in the past. They originally came there in 1908. They've made a huge difference over the years, and the people are still benefiting from those missionaries. They built schools and they managed them very well. There were about a couple of hundred in a school with many expatriate missionaries there to do the work, and they were to raise money when they went back home on furloughs, and they kept up good standards. But now those same schools are still there with little improvements in the building and just local staff who are very faithful. There's not enough money. And now in those same schools where there was a few hundred, there are thousands. And not much change in how they construct the school. So bathrooms have become a top priority for me. I visited many of these schools and seen this terrible situation. The situation with the toilets situation has really broken down. And therefore I started this, what I call the TTT for PNG, Taps, Toilets and Transformation. Because women are treated so badly in Papua New Guinea, it's one of the worst in the world. They say that 80% of the women are beaten, more than half of the women are raped. Sorcery, witchcraft and burnings and cuttings are common because accusations against women are rife. Women are beaten while others sometimes watch because they're too afraid to intervene. And so thus I think it's important to help fix those bathrooms in our schools as part of the process of teaching girls that they need to be respected and they can have dignity. I believe it can only enhance their personal worth, along with being able to stand strong and show that they cannot be abused. I don't want the women of that beautiful country. It's a beautiful country, Papua New Guinea. I don't want them to go on being endlessly hurt. And so it brings me to my second project or concern is sex. In Thailand, sex slavery is enormous. And during the late 1990s, my son, Marlon Butler, worked with ADRA Thailand for quite a number of years. And he began to know or see the atrocities against girls and found that there were very few girls left in the villages where ADRA put in their water tanks and water programs. Many of them had been taken away to the cities. And the parents thought they were sending girls off for good work to send money back to them to help them in their villages. But they were being sent off to brothels and horrible places to become sex slaves and prostitutes. Often they were as young as 12 and 13, just young girls. Some returned with HIV/AIDS to their houses, to their homes, to be left in back rooms because the people, their parents and families were ashamed of them. Many had small children to care for. Well, we found the industry was enormous, and it's still enormous. And I've met many of those girls now in Bangkok, in the clubs, in small towns. But I also now meet the happy ones because we started a project, and I eventually called it the Keep Girls Safe Project, and you may have heard of it. There's a beautiful home now in Chiang Rai in the northern part of the country where up to 40 girls can be at one time, and there they are educated and given a chance for a wonderful life. And they too are serving in this uncertain world. You can see them on their Facebook group, you can see them on their website, and they're serving the vulnerable people in Thailand during this uncertain time and teaching others. Their house is right next door to a church, which is wonderful, and many of them now have become Christians. They sing in the church, they have a choir there, and they're reaching out to others. It's wonderful to visit and see what's happened. It's not a good subject to talk about sex slavery and prostitution, but it's enormous, and I want to help. And if you wanted to be a volunteer in that place, that's something you could think about when the time is right. I don't want the women of Thailand to go on being endlessly hurt and endlessly abused. Which brings me to my third subject or topic or project that I'm concerned about, and I've entitled it Savannah. You know, in Africa there are over 1 billion people in 56 countries. Millions are poor and downtrodden, persecuted and violated. Women suffer in every way. Well, FGM, female genital mutilation, affects millions of girls in many northern parts of Africa. Some countries in northern Africa, as much as 90% or more of the women have been mutilated. The suffering when it is done by older women is horrible. They use old blades, razor blades or sharp knives, no anesthetic, extremely painful. Of course, some girls have run away to avoid this, but some have it done and are just left alone to suffer and gradually heal. Of course, some die. In countries like Kenya, where I've lived, it's illegal to do this, but it continues in out-of-the-way villages. And people like my friends Kim and Barbara are helping to stop this and provide safe places for girls to live. Do you know the schools have been closed in Kenya for most of this year in this uncertain time of COVID-19? And so thousands of girls have gone home from boarding schools where they were safe and have now been mutilated. Thousands have become pregnant. They've been raped by a member of their family or someone in the village. Those thousands of girls will never return to school. They'll become young mothers and young wives. And this is a tragic consequence of COVID-19, of this uncertain time in many parts of Africa. This FGM is actually supposed to keep girls pure and safe for men to marry. But of course, it's a very painful time for those girls when they are married. To give birth is often very difficult. The small opening to urinate has to be cut open. It's a horrible subject. And I don't want women in Africa to go on endless being hurt. My friends Kim and Barbara have places to help. They keep girls safe. And they need ongoing support and help. And if you want to help them, you can find their information. I'm very happy to share it with you. Yes, I don't want women in Africa to go on endless being hurt. And I talk about these things because I want to be part of the people who speak up and to prevent this from happening. I was very sorrowful just recently when I read in The Guardian, which is a British daily newspaper, for safe journalistic freedom. And they said in that recent newspaper that the COVID crisis could force millions of girls into child marriage. And that's true, I know that. The Save the Children predicts the worst rise in child marriage rates in 25 years as a result of the pandemic. Another report warns of 2020 being a year of irreversible setbacks and lost progress for girls. Around the world, school closures have interrupted the education of 1.6 billion children, and Save the Children estimates that 10 million children, mostly girls, will never return to school. I've just spoken about that for Kenya. In India, the trafficked children there has increased 600% just during that time in between April and May during their severe lockdown. That's enormous. We're going backwards when it comes to women's. and progress for women in the world. And so I want to be this voice for the voiceless people. And I love the text in Proverbs 3, 8 and 9, and you'll know it well too. It says, "Open your mouth for the speechless in the cause of all who are appointed to die." Open your mouth, judge righteously, and plead the cause of the poor and needy. And so while I have energy and health, I will keep doing this because I think that God has called me to do it. This is the work of Jesus. I wear a couple of pins on my lapel here, which I want you to notice. The top one is the ampersand brooch or pin that Virginia Davidson designed so beautifully and spread around the world in recent times for Adventist women. It shows that women and men can work together to bless others, can work together equally. And then I have the pin from AAW, which was given to me at a convention I attended some years ago in your beautiful country of USA. And I hope that many of you are watching and are part of the AAW, which has done such a wonderful work in the past for uplifting women and helping women all over the world. So thank you to AA for all you've done. We do live in uncertain times, and we are serving in uncertain times. And I want to urge you to continue to serve in uncertain times. We don't know what the future is and how this is all going to finish or when the COVID-19 concerns are going to come to an end. But we know and we believe, we have faith that God is still there. We've watched this in the past. We've seen how he led us. And I believe he's still leading us and will lead us into the future. And this is my great hope and the faith that I have. May God bless you, each one, as you listen, as you watch, as you hear the presentations in these uncertain times. We know that God is with us, will be with us. Thank you. God bless you, everyone.
So we are just so excited today to have with us some inspiring, beautiful, amazing women who are going to share with us some of what they've done to be a blessing to people in their community. I'm just going to take a quick second and introduce each one of them, and then we'll have an opportunity to hear a lot more about what it is that they have done and what they're doing. So the first person I want to introduce is Pastor Elena Camarena. She's the associate pastor of the Paradise Valley Spanish Church. And we'll have an opportunity to hear a little bit more from her later. We also have with us Jolene Hilliard. She is the co-chair of the Little White House, which is under the Medical Auxiliary at Loma University. And she's also been doing awesome work in the community. And lastly, we have with us Cynthia Prime, who is the CEO and co-founder of Saving Orphans Through Healthcare and Outreach, which she has let me know is short for, or is the long form for SOHO. So SOHO is an acronym for Saving Orphans Through Healthcare and Outreach. And again, we are so excited to have each one of you with us this afternoon. So this afternoon, we're talking about ways that we have served in this community or in our communities through uncertain times. And we are most definitely facing uncertain times right now. I'm sure you guys can all agree. I want to begin with how and why each of you have committed to serving in your community. So maybe you could begin by telling us a little bit about how is it that you are serving right now? And what are some of the things that you're doing in your community, maybe before and during this pandemic? I want to start with Pastor Camarena.
It has been a blessing to, even amidst this pandemic, it's been a blessing to be able to reach out to our community. We have been having a pantry, a food distribution that was taking place. We have quite a few years doing this, and we've tried to build it up and reach out to our community. So a lot of them are just, we know them by first names. And before the pandemic came, we were doing this once a month. Once it came, we realized that we needed to do it a little bit more often. So we did it twice a month for about 3 months. And then we went back to doing once a month. And it has been such a blessing. I think more a blessing for all of our members than it is really for the community, because when you serve, you are the one that's being blessed. And we've been able to feed about 150 to 200 families every month. And it has just been really a wonderful experience, and getting to know them. One of the things that we have missed is that before the pandemic, we would make a prayer circle with these our friends from the community, and we haven't been able to do that. That closeness that you have when you hold hands and you just pray. And they would tell us the needs, and we would continue praying for them. And so we have missed that. But it has been wonderful to continue being able to help and fill a need that is very real, not only for our community, but also for our church members.
Right. You've been facing what a lot of people have been facing in, Southern California, and frankly, throughout the world, church members who are facing hunger, as well as people in the community. And it's just so exciting to hear that your church is doing something practical to meet those needs. I want to talk to Jolene Hillard, who's also been doing things to help meet the needs of the community and continues to do so during the pandemic. Can you tell me a little bit more about what you do?
Okay, I'll give a little background on what the Little White House is. It is a student outreach program that the Loma Linda University Medical Auxiliary supports in a big way. It has been in operation for 35 years, and basically the community donates, volunteers sort, and then we have another group that does design displays in the 5 small rooms of our house and sets up furniture vignettes in the back patio. On scheduled Monday evenings, the students, 120 to 250 come, and they wait outside, and it's really fun to see the energy that happens. Some of the students are from international countries, and they arrive here with nothing. Others might need a table and chairs, a lamp, some towels, but they each come with a different goal. And when they leave, some may have a sofa delivered to their home. They may have a new sport coat that fits perfectly. They may have new holiday decor, and some leave with a bridal gown. We have a bridal boutique. So it's actually very exciting. We like students, and the community is so supportive. The volunteers love students. And when Sharon Stewart and I both became co-chairs 6 years ago, we had a goal, and that was to make every student that arrived on campus to feel like our community was theirs, that they were welcome. We wanted to show them warmth, and that they felt a part of it. And our motto is open heart, open door. So it's so fun to see the joy that emanates from the volunteers and the students as the students leave with dinner, having had dinner, and with their free purchases. Everything is free. And, it's just, I always think, what better way to form a relationship than around food? And we have a chance to visit with the students like that. So it's a joy.
I can see the joy emanating from you, and I'm sure everyone feels the joy when they come to the Little White House. That is exciting. We'll hear a little bit more later. I want to also take a moment to talk with Cynthia Prime. Jolene was talking about being able to serve international students on Loma Linda campus, but you kind of do the opposite. You live in the United States and serve people internationally. Can you tell us a little bit more about your organization and how it started? I'm interested.
Certainly. This organization was founded 14 years ago, not intentionally. I had a speaking engagement in Swaziland. Now it's Eswatini, they call it. And it's one of those things that you hear the voice of God and you answer. And it was as simple as that. It was the height of the AIDS pandemic. And so you had probably about 150,000 orphans and vulnerable children. And you had about 10-15% of them heading households, mainly girls. And that's a recipe for abuse and a recipe for trafficking, and it's a recipe for all kinds of atrocities. And I was their first woman camp meeting speaker, and had raised enough to feed 1,000 children 3 meals a day with the help of 3ABN, actually, for the week of the camp meeting. And it changed the trajectory of my life. It changed me completely, because when I left, I heard a voice say, Cynthia, these are the least of these. Now, what do you think God is telling you? He can say, these are the least of these. It's like, if you do it for them, you do for me. And so I quit my job cold turkey, and just haven't had a paycheck since then. I live a humble life, but watch God rock. It's amazing. Anyway, we've got in 3 different parts of the country, there's a multi-purpose center in a place called Mushushani. And there are a lot of young girls having babies because they don't have options. You have a lot of transactional sex. And so you have a lot of poverty. And so we have this place where we've had a feeding program. We've had weekend events for girls who've been abused and what have you. Right now, because of COVID, all we could do is feed about 150 children. And they do them in shifts. The only people who have masks, the grannies, they call them go-go's, who and those who are serving. The children don't have masks, but what they do social distancing, and they put them in groups of 20, and we get the food, load them with what they need, and they spend a little time, and then they have to leave, and another 20. So you do those shifts like that. So that's one area. Now, more towards the middle of town, where COVID was more intense because it's very populated, we have one of the first schools in the country that do anything with children with disabilities. They're supposed to be cursed. And so there's a lot of abuse there, but God has provided a grant for us to have one of the first schools that also help children, inclusive schools, helping children with disabilities. So it's preschool, and with God's help, we hope to put a primary there. But school is out, and that means when the children who could be safe at school are now at home, and then they are vulnerable to abuse. So what we've been doing, they've been working as much as they could, sending homework, and it's very limited what you could do there. But the area there that we're serving is called the Mara Camp. They call it the squatter camp because it's the place of last resort. It's a lot of children, a lot of women, a lot of, it's a trafficker's paradise, if you will. And we've been providing food and whatnot for about 150, spiritual nurture. We're doing what we can and trying as best as we can to keep everybody safe. The thing that I think is most impacting right now, in answer to a 8 to 10 year prayer for a place where it will not be owned by the government or by the, Swazi nation land, it would be our own land. God provided. Prayed for 30 acres. He provided 1,083. And God will always exceed your expectations. Anyway, we have been growing food like crazy on that place and taking it down to the Maracam and we've been able to do more in supplying food right now, and that's a biggie. The children, if they don't go to school, they don't get food. So that's a bit of what we're doing, and there's a lot more we'd like to do, but God is blessed.
That is so awesome and so inspiring. You mentioned, Cynthia, some of the things that you have had to do during the pandemic to pivot. And we know that any of us who do service or work in business, we hear this word pivot often, how we have to be flexible. I want to hear from the other ladies, because you've been doing service, before the pandemic started. What have you had to do to pivot to meet the needs of people during the pandemic? I want to start with this Pastor Elena Camarena.
Well, after hearing these wonderful ladies talk about their ministries, it makes me want to get involved. It's awesome. I'm so blessed to have such a wonderful church family. We really are a family. And when the pandemic hit, it's not only how to be able to keep them, to keep them safe, our church and our, the community, keeping everyone safe, but it's also how to keep connected. And that has been a challenge, and we've been blessed. We have a wonderful audiovisual team that has kept our services live streamed, and so we've had that connection. We also have a wonderful prayer ministry that really went into full force. It always was working, but it seemed like it was even stronger. And the members just helping each other. Like calling and finding out each other's needs, and in that reaching out to the community. When we were distributing the food, they would come out to prepare all this and distribute it, drive through. And so it's different things that you have to do to make this work. But one of the, I think, most important is that connection, because it's a connection not only spiritually, but it's a connection of especially the Hispanic community. We're very much into, we see each other and we hug each other. We're just very expressive. And so not to have that, and members that technology is not their strongest point. It's so we've had members calling, trying to help them to be able to connect. And so, yes, it has been doing ministry differently, but definitely a blessing as we see how God continues to lead his church, because it really is amazing. And I just thank God so much for that wonderful church family, so caring for each other, for our community, willing to give of their time and their love to help and to be able to continue that connection. So when we one day can be able to freely come back and worship and everything, we'll be able to do this because the connection is there.
So it sounds like you just kind of continued something that you had started before, which is like that sense of family. You just had to, do some shifts during the pandemic, but you just continue what you've been doing. Yes. So Jolene, in what ways have you had to pivot and shift and adapt at the Little White House?
Well, at the beginning, we closed and we were following the university's protocol. And so for the first 8 weeks, we did not even go into sort. It's amazing how the word has spread with the White House and how far reaching it is that people bring things for us. So I kind of like to look at it as two main issues we faced when we came back after 8 weeks. It was too much and too many. After 8 weeks, the students still didn't come, but we were getting ready for them. And by too much, when we reopened, we were inundated. We didn't do any intake for 8 weeks. And when we opened, inundated, everybody, including myself and maybe you, when we were sheltered in, did you sort your closet, your cupboards? Well, it all came to the White House. So we had a lot. And so that was about the 1st of May, and we reopened the middle of June. And so I said we had hundreds of bags and boxes, and I said we almost suffered from overabundance. I mean, that's a blessing, but I always remind the students when I can that this community loves students. They love to give and think that their items are being used. Even the 92-year-old man who thinks somebody might want his suit, we take it graciously. But so it's very sweet. The other issue, is too many students, and how can you complain? But before the pandemic, the students would line up ahead of when we were to open. Sometimes we've had 100 waiting on the sidewalk across from the Loma Market. When we open and the women check them in because they have to check their IDs, they would just fill the house and fill the patio. We'd have a lot of people. I always hoped the firemen wouldn't come by because we probably had too many. But obviously that had to change. And we've been shifting and learning, and I feel like we've developed a program that now is working. We use the website called Sign Up Genius. And so I send out an email to the 8 different schools. They send it out to their students. The students go on to Sign Up Genius. We have so many slots per 15-minute segments. They sign up, it closes it off, and that's how we move through our time slots. So that has worked really well. There's issues, but we're working them out. We can no longer have our buffets where the students sit around on the sofas and the tables to eat. As they exit our driveway area, they're handed a to-go box that the gals have put together. And so we still feel like we're giving them a bit of home. We like to think of it like that. So that's how we've had to deal.
Oh, that's awesome. I love it. And that actually leads me to my next question. And I'm going to address this question to Cynthia Prime. Joy Butler, she often talks about how service involves risk and problem solving. Do you think that those, you already see you nodding your head. I was like, do you think that those who serve on a regular basis are more able to adapt during this crisis? And how have you had to, do some problem solving and take some risks as you've adapted during this crisis?
Well, I will tell you this, for all of the women here on this panel, you've had some level of risk, in one way or another. And it's just heartwarming to listen to what you're doing. As far as risk is concerned, it's very difficult to feel a calling to do a lot, and when you don't, if you don't have a church or a conference or a corporation or this one or that one backing you up, and your heart is bleeding for the dozens and dozens and scores of children and girls who it's not like hungry, it's going without. It's not like thirsty, it's drinking dirty water. And you know that you want to do something, then what do? You take a risk knowing that you want to do a big job and you have no resources. And the first risk is a risk of faith. You don't have a choice but to trust God. You won't want it any other way. And I have discovered that when He calls us to any position of leadership, He doesn't think that it is because you're equipped, because I'm a round peg in a square hole, definitely. But He provides. It's His way of doing and exceeding your expectations. As far as risks go, there are the cultural risks. If on this end I am raising awareness of the increased abuse because of COVID, 1 in 3 girls gets violated, you get a lot of very heavy statistics on that end. And you have to work within the context of the culture and be respectful. It's a polygamous society. You have to be respectful, and yet still you have to do what you have to do in order to make a difference in the lives of the girls. So it is risk-taking because you won't please everybody all the time, and yet still you could see progress being made. As far as COVID is concerned, there's greater risk for those who aren't able to get out because there's an increasing domestic violence, and because people are closed in. And how do you minister to them? We've had to be very creative, and food goes a long way, no matter how it is given. Food is love. That's why God has this big table where he's going to feed all of his redeemed children. Food goes a long way when you can't do anything for a child or for a woman, but you can make sure that they get a proper meal. It helps a lot, but it's the nature of things.
I want to pose a different question to the other ladies. Oftentimes, we say that, service is important, and we say that, service is like the most important thing, but sometimes it seems like within the church hierarchy, serving and meeting people's basic needs seems to come like second or even lower. Do you guys have an idea, like, why do you think that is? That it seems sometimes that people maybe who are on the stage are more valued than people who serve in basic ways? That's like a
That's a good question. I think service, when it's done with a heart full of love, it just always comes back. It's something that you are more blessed as you serve. And somehow it could be seen that way. But for me personally, I think when you serve and you do it out of love, it's so like natural that then it's just kind of, I don't know, it flows naturally. There isn't anything that is, it's just a service full of love. And I think that's how the Lord can use us, is when we just serve because he served out of love. And when we can serve like that, we really are the ones that are blessed more than the ones that we are serving. I see it every time with the community, with my church members. Every day my prayer is, Lord, if there is a need and I can help, please show me what it is that you have for me today. And inevitably, I will have someone's name come to my mind, and I will call that person, and that person will tell me, this is just what I needed. It might have been a prayer need, a physical need, a spiritual need, an emotional need, but God put that person in my heart. And I end up being blessed more than the person that I called, because I see God's hand working in that. And so that's why I think when we serve in that way, it's just such a blessing. The returns are just, I don't know. You don't even think about those returns. You're just serving, and it's just a joy that it brings joy, great joy, as you see what God does.
Yes. I can see the joy again, like you said, like I said earlier, radiating off of you. All of you, I'm inspired as I listen to each of you talk about service. So Jolene, I kind of want to throw that question at you, and maybe with a little twist. Someone said, she's like, oh no. So we were talking about the way things happen in church, and sometimes certain gifts are maybe valued more than others. So this is a controversial question I've been giving. I'm just passing it on. So do you think that men and women see service differently? Is that something that you've observed?
I think I'll go answer what the other ones answered. No, I actually talked about this question with my husband, and my circumstances are a little different. I have done service as a volunteer for many years. I did not work outside of the home except kind of a side business. So to actually evaluate anything in the professional world, that wouldn't have been my experience. But I feel like, as far as the Little White House, it is mainly run by women. We do have men that come help us serve when we need to, and our husbands are supportive when we need them. I kind of look at my husband because he is an oncologist, and he serves in a different way all day long, and it can be gut-wrenching. And he has his other projects he's worked on. So, it's just a different approach, I think, for how he handles his service. I think that also, as far as I think you asked a question about the church, is it, where on the level of priorities does service come? And I feel like a lot of churches try or have opportunities, but I find that it's when a friend is involved in something that gets another friend in or pulls people in. And I'll have to say, I send an email out to 25 volunteers at the White House, when we're having an upcoming opening, and some support with gifts of money, because we do drawings for like smoothies at the Loma Market, or, Target gift cards are a huge thing. Some will bake cookies for me for the dinners that we provide, and some are there every week sorting and at night. And that group has become such a cohesive group of friends. For people that have retired, some of them will retire and then come work for us. They felt like it just filled a niche. So I feel like it's when friends or very enthusiastic pastors can really draw people in for service. It's hard to just sign up on a line for something you know nothing about, or if you don't know anybody that's doing it.
What I hear you saying, to me, I hear you saying that service can be contagious.
Mm-hmm.
When one person starts to serve and, people see the joy that they get from serving, they invite a friend and say, come on, join with me, serve. And it sort of builds like that. So we're hoping that that's what happens today, that when people watch this program, they're going to be like, wow, they look so excited about serving. I want to experience some of that joy. I want to serve. And so we know that that's going to happen. So I want to talk a little bit about leadership. Leaders are continuously told to assess their effectiveness. How do you each, as a leader in your own right, assess your effectiveness? How do you know if, what you're doing is effective? Let's start with, we haven't heard from Cynthia in a while. Let's start with Cynthia. How do you assess your effectiveness as a leader?
Well, in my case, I call myself the chief cheerleader. That's what I am, because, you can't afford staff. So my own philosophy is whatever I ask you to do, I'm willing to do myself. I cook for them, I feed them, my staff. I don't pay them very much, but I give them a lot of love. And we do have a philosophy that the culture is important. The culture is important. I have seen the difference it makes when the wrong spirit is in there. Had an interesting experience. Here you are, women, a lot of girls, a lot of young women want to be interns. So it's usually a lot of women, and occasionally there is a young man who would volunteer. But I remember a gentleman who came through, highly recommended, the first, and he felt that he could help with fundraising, he could do, and before I knew it, he sat in a staff meeting and he said, do you know what will really move this organization forward? A change of leadership. He said, you know what you need to be doing, he said to me, is you need to be out there meeting people, raising money, and the running of the organization, get a good, get someone, and I certainly am capable of doing that. And I'm thinking to myself, 10, 12 years with not a paycheck and watching God do, and somebody walks in because your style of leadership. I believe in honoring everyone, regardless of age, regardless of circumstances. You treat everyone with respect. It doesn't mean that you are so laid back you're falling over and somebody's going to walk over you. But sometimes if you're willing to mop, or if you're willing to hold, or if you're willing to nurture, or you're willing to wash the dishes, you're willing to be in there and do whatever is done, sometimes that's perceived as not up to stature. And so in his case, he made a mistake because he thought that I probably shouldn't be running the organization, go knock on doors and raise money. He said, you've written books, hey, get them, put them in the car, I'll take you around. And I thought to myself, wow, is that the perception? But you know what? Those people had to be out of the circle. That environment of connectedness, working together, knowing that God is in charge. God is in charge. We treat each other with mutual respect. We do that. We make sure, I said, I don't want to look at or say anything or have an environment that God is embarrassed or uncomfortable to walk in here. Jesus should be able to put on some jeans, walk in here and really have a blast. Hey, what are we going to do next? Because he's a servant leader. I don't need studges or someone to say, you got to sit and be corporate. That's why I didn't fit into the corporate, the typical corporate setting. So, the thing that I would have to say is you've got to be firm in who you are and what your mission is. Because to your point, sometimes within the church, there's a hierarchy. Okay, and those who are able to go up on the pulpit and those who are able to do this and do that, or be on this board or be on that board, there is an elite. And they are to be treated a particular way. But, those who work for the homeless or do this or do that, it's nice that they're doing it. It's a good thing. But there are people probably who may not feel called to that. Give me the pulpit. Give me, I need to be out front. I will tell you that Jesus exemplified service by kneeling down and washing feet. He exemplified, I tell them, a truly great person will wash a beggar's feet. You would do it. You'd wash a child's feet. You'll take guidance from a child if that child has something worthwhile to say, because you're confident in yourself. And as women, there are enough, and each of you, I'm sure, probably have had people who have in one way or another just felt that you're a woman, and that maybe this is a man's job, or what you have to do is not as important as what they have to do. It doesn't matter. Everybody needs their own space, but you just have to be grounded in who you are and know that in your own self, you don't dish what you get if it's not good. You rise above and you mirror the Spirit of Christ. You create a culture that, what they call it, the Soho family. I've had Irish Catholics who become passionate Seventh-day Adventists because of the love from the Soho family. They like the food, and their little trials, and it's a family. It's a family that Jolene is ministering to. It's a family that Elena is ministering to there, and we're all part of the family of God, and we've got to see it that way.
I want to share the opportunities with the other ladies of answering this question. How would you say that you assess your effectiveness? I'm going next to Pastor Camarena.
to be a leader, you need to serve. And I always ask myself, really, Lord, what can I do? Because there is no way that you can lead if you don't have the Lord beside you at every moment. And it's so important because it is God who gives us the strength. It is God who helps us rise up and take hold of a situation. It really is nothing of our doing. And everything that I can do to alleviate someone's need, if I can help when, a member that's going through a difficult time, then it's all for God's glory. And I think that's the evaluation that I use. I say, Lord, just continue using me. And every day, every moment, just continue using me. And I guess it's God's work. And he will tell me when he has something else for me to do, or if he, what else needs to be done. He's the one that's going to show me. And so I think the way that it's very hard to say, am I being effective or not? To say, just Lord, use me. And then I will be effective because you're the one that's behind, you're the one that's leading it. You're behind it all.
Amen. That's beautiful. I want to pose this same questions to Sister Jolene, your last but not least, for sure.
Well, before we open the door to the students, we have prayer with the volunteers, and our prayer is, let the students see the love of Jesus in us. May we be intuitive to someone's need that may not be obvious. Sure, we can guide them to a sofa, we can guide them to, their some towels or whatever, but let us see if there's something else they need. And one time we did an Easter egg treasure hunt, and we hid it amongst all the rooms and the furniture out there. One egg had a $20 bill, and the girl she said she did not have money for food. And it was just so touching. So when you, as far as effectiveness at the White House, sure, you can go by numbers of students served. I mean, that kind of reminds me of the old fashioned Sabbath School years ago when they'd raise your hand, how many, friends did you hand out? Or, little friends, the papers. But the other thing is, the students do keep coming back. But to me, it's the stories. And there are so many, but there's two little examples. One of our first years when we were there, we got a beautiful antique wooden jewelry box that had come in that morning, and we were open that evening. And a student came through, and she was pondering and looking at that, and she thought, that's going to work. She happened to be a religious studies major and took that box as their prayer box when their group met. It was just a beautiful story. One time, a freshman med student texted me and said, do you happen to have any tents at the White House? We had hardly ever had a tent. And I said, I am so sorry, we don't. He had a summer break. He and his wife wanted to travel through national parks. The very next morning, a brand new tent was dropped off, large enough for 2 people. And I just think God smiles on just even these little things. It wasn't a necessary thing, but we just have had that happen so many times. So that's what keeps us going.
Beautiful.
Amen. I love it. I want to ask this last question. I'm going to pose this question to Cynthia. What advice would you give someone who has a big dream? They feel like God has put a big dream on their heart for ministry, but they don't know where to begin. What would you say to that person?
Well, I would say to them, the very first thing they have to do is establish that connection and communication on the spiritual level to know that this is what you're called to do. Sometimes in our hearts, we want to change the world. We want to fix so many things. But God, sometimes he takes you in steps. And if you're looking for the big journey, sometimes you miss the first step. Sometimes very often it's a growth process. And that's what he does. In my case, I've never run an NGO. I came from a different corporate background, mass communications background. I didn't know anything about this, but it was a first step. It was a first step of trying to serve orphans and vulnerable children. Then God said, okay, Cynthia, by the way, you need to be a voice for those children who are being sexually abused, or these girls who can't because their rights, they have no rights because they're orphans, there's no legal help, then you need to be a voice. So then you end up in social advocacy on both continents, having forums here with like Naomi Tutu and Nelson Mandela's stepdaughter and these folk, all addressing the same issues there and here, because you realize you're serving here. There are needs here and there are needs there, but the common need is the need for justice for women, the need for dignity for women, regardless of what part of the world they are. And if we aren't a voice, as Jesus was a voice when they brought the woman to be stoned and he gave her love instead, if we aren't a voice, then who would be? So to answer your question, first search your heart, spend the time with the Lord so that you're grounded, because when you step out with the Lord, prepare to whitewater raft. It's never dull. It's never smooth sailing. Get ready for adventure. He's a God of adventure. Okay. So you take the first step, but always remember that he's going to stretch you. When he says exceedingly abundantly above all that you would ask or think, he intends to stretch us. He doesn't intend that we should stay where we are spiritually or in our zone. It's like elastic. He keeps stretching you and he keeps taking you step by step. And now I'm looking back and I'm saying, only God. He thrills to do the extraordinary in the ordinary, because that is how he is glorified.
Amen.
That is how he is glorified. If I can do everything I think I want to do, what room is there for God? But if he says, you're going to have to trust me, but come on, honey, I've got a journey for you. And you may not be familiar, but if you know I'm with you, this is where you discover me. And it's been the thrill of my life to think that with no money, we're still those piddly little staff and ton of volunteers and partners all over the place. But here we are looking to set up a children's village, a refuge for children at risk of trafficking. Here we are, where we are going to be able in a more formal way to do training for women, abuse prevention and substance abuse prevention, and really have a lighthouse on a hill. And you wonder, how did you do it, Lord? Because you didn't have the money, you didn't have the connections, but God will blow your mind. The big dream starts with that connection with him. And he may start you on a big scale, but don't miss the fact that he may begin taking your hand one step at a time. Be willing to go at his pace, be willing to trust him. You will never regret it.
Amen. Oh, I feel so inspired, so inspired. I want to pose a question to Jolene. I want to pose this question to you because you said earlier that your husband was an oncologist, and you didn't tell us much about your background, but I learned by reading your bio that you've been an English teacher, but then you spend a lot of time, you said earlier that you were just doing little things on the side. So I want you to talk to a woman out there who is thinking, you know, my husband has a big job, I'm just doing a little bit, you know, something over here. I don't know if it makes a difference. What would you tell that woman to encourage her to get out there and serve?
Well, for me, it started really with children in school. You know, you get involved in their projects, and you're the mother that can drive, you know, on field trips and whatever. From that, it built, and again, you make friendships with other moms that are doing that, the dads that helped at the school fair. So it's just very small things like that. Then, what would I say? I think because the organization, the Medical Auxiliary Organization, I've worked with them for years, and, you know, they raise money for missions. We hear stories from all around the world. You become very inspired and want to help that. They give scholarships for students. And so because my son was going through medical school, you know, that was something that was dear to my heart. And so it was because of that then that I got into the White House. So I think it is just putting yourself in positions of growth, whether it's with a friend or with the church. You never know. My husband signed up to tutor, you know, at the church, and thought he'd try that. So there's just different ways to, I mean, I think you have to do a little research on your own. And building on what Cynthia said, I mean, it was so beautifully said. And I remember hearing someone say, so I think too, you have to be prepared. So in other words, do your education, do your research. If there's projects you want to do, you can't just, you know, blindly start these things usually. And then somebody said, and it was an unusual twist, it is who you know. In other words, all the friends and the people you make, they help guide you along the path. And they can be very good advocates for you and opening a new world to you. So I think you just have to get out there and ask questions as far as, you know, mothers and homemakers who want to try things. I don't think there's any set course, but just be open.
Amen. I'm cognizant of the time. I want to give Pastor Elena the last word. What would you say to somebody, maybe someone in your congregation who is thinking, you know what, I don't have a big degree. I, you know, have never been the CEO of a Fortune 500 company. Can God use me? What would you say to that person?
You know, I do have members in my church that come and say, Pastor, the Lord has put this ministry in my heart, or something that I want to do for God. And I always tell them, if God has put it in your heart, then we need to pray about this. And because you have come to me, what can I do to help you? Is there anything I can do? Is there anything that our congregation can do, our church family can do to help you with this ministry that God has put in your heart? And that helps them to be able to start thinking about looking at this more closely, you know, like making a plan or thinking a little bit more about it. And I take the time to pray with them, because I do believe that when God puts something in your heart, then that's when you really need to pray about this. And he opens doors that you didn't even realize could be opened. And some of our ministries have just blossomed like that because the Lord put that thought. So if someone is thinking about this, they want to do something for God or a ministry serve, the time is to find someone who could maybe help you in that area. And definitely continue praying about this, because if God put it in there, that ministry is going to go to places you would never imagine it could go.
Amen. I want to answer the question myself that I asked earlier. How do you know if your ministry is effective? And this words of this song came to my mind. If I can help somebody as I travel along, if I can help somebody with a word or song, if I can help somebody from doing wrong, then my living shall not be in vain. And all of you ladies this evening have reminded me that it's not about who you know, but it's who you know. And knowing God is the most important thing. And if we just stay obedient to him, then our living will not be in vain. We thank you so much for joining us and sharing your stories with everybody this evening. God bless.
We are incredibly lucky, aren't we? Not only do we have God's love and grace, we have food and a home and safety. I find that it's that place of gratitude where I hear God's still small voice calling me to service. Let's talk to Him. Dear God, thank you so much for the love and grace and care that you give us, for the food and blessings that we have. Please give us your generosity, your spirit, so that we can share our time, our money, and our prayers for those who have less. Thank you. Join us next week when we talk about healthcare disparities, how Adventist hospitals are coping with the pandemic, and how to repackage the Adventist health message for today.